today I've been seeing this thing where it's not even just today, it's actually this entire week, but it is the use of the word or the name Karen.
I knew you were going to do this one. From your Instagram story.
I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. Because you call yourself one of these, you call yourself a basic Betty.
Yes.
Becky.
Okay, so I mean, in fairness, I do enjoy the basicness of life. I love a cozy hoodie. I love a latte. I'm basic. I'm basic Becky.
I love you.
But in that term or basic Becky, we're not using it in a derogatory manner, right? But when we're talking about Karen, we typically are. And so I'm wondering, for us, Christian and non-Christian, how do we feel on the use of the word or naming somebody Karen? And let me actually give some context to who a Karen is.
Mm-hmm.
So
help me out.
Yeah, pull up Urban Dictionary.
Gosh, I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to pull up Urban Dictionary. But a Karen would be a person of privilege, typically a woman who is Caucasian, so white, and she knows that she is privileged. And she knows in this moment or instance, she is not happy, and she will then use said privilege to get her way, even if she is not in the right. So she may not be the owner of the property, but she will use her privilege to then speak up and tell a little girl that she cannot sell water on the corner of the street. She will then maybe call the police in a public park to say that these group of black people can't have a barbecue here. And it's not usually in a nice way. It's usually at the expense of someone else. So I'm trying to package it very nice and neatly. But are we okay with then now labeling that person Karen? No, she's a Karen. And putting her now in this category and leaving her there.
So I think words are so interesting because words have meaning, and like I really do think words have meaning for a reason. And so like I'm not the kind of Christian who's like, oh, I never use swear words, I never use bad words because all Christians should have pure and holy language. Like no, like there are certain things that calling something as bad is doing it a disservice. No, like that's if I'm in private like that's effed up. Like no, that person is some kind of expletive because that expletive actually carries weight and it carries emotion. And for me, like language, like to call that person a mean person would not be strong enough language. That there's an importance and there's an important role for strong language, even in the life of a Christian. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean I walk around saying bleep this, bleep that, like all the time. Like, no, for me, I reserve the use of that language for important times. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to something like a Karen, if we use it frivolously, then it tends to lose its meaning. But does the idea of a Karen accurately describe a particular type of action? So I think the challenge with Karen is that it can be like a race thing. It largely is as you defined it. Mm-hmm. But if we take the race component away, is there something like, does the word Karen simply mean someone in privilege wielding that privilege as a weapon? Is that wrong? In my opinion, no. If the shoe fits, like that's exactly what it is.
Well, I was going to add, like there was a story I think about a week ago where we appropriately named this woman Karen, but where she berated, I believe he was a barista at Starbucks. And so, I mean, it was, if you will, white on white assault. But no, but just, sorry, more context to that later. But she was using then that moment to now berate somebody, and it was all caught on camera. And so she knew she was white, she knew she was privileged, and she knew that she was not getting her way in that moment. So yet she then decided to use all of that in that moment with a visceral response to berate and belittle or devalue someone else. So, it doesn't even have to be a race component. It just, in that moment, it can be where you want to devalue another image bearer. And so I'll open the floor for anyone else on that.
Well, that's where I kind of land because, like, I'm with you, Justin, in understanding that words have meanings and they have weight, and there's certain things I would say in certain contexts. Like, even with you, you said that you're, a basic Becky or
Yes.
basic Betty. Like with Will, it's like, oh, it's fun and it's funny and it's
Lots
true.
of
But if I were to use that term with someone else and call another female a basic Becky and she wasn't my friend or I didn't know her, like you would appropriately take that in a completely different way, because it would hold a different weight, right? I wouldn't be saying it probably out of love for her or out of like a jokey, like she's my sis kind of way. It would be as like I am possibly calling her out of her identity. We talk a lot about like calling people out of their names, and we try not to do that, but not calling females by the B word or calling people dumb or stupid. But it seems like it's easier for us to call people out of their identity though, and possibly sever them from who Christ is calling them to be or has called them to be. And that's where I land. I'm just like, I could see in what context I might use that and it's playful, but is that making it harder for me to see them as a child of God, as a daughter, as a son? Because if it is, then I really should not be using that word at all, because that's not where I want to be. I want to see everyone with the same eyes that God sees them, which is with love, and that they are also the righteousness of God in Christ, and that the grace is sufficient for them too. So if using that term is making it harder for me, I don't want to use it.
Do you think that Jesus would use that term? Do you think Jesus would call someone a Karen or a basic Betty or any other kind of like pejorative thing?
He called people vipers.
Right. That's what I'm glad that you say that, because like he's like, no, you're a whitewashed tomb. You're a brood of viper. You're the spawn of Satan. I think is what you are of your father the devil is another way of saying like you're Satan's spawn. Like, so Jesus was willing to use really strong language to accurately call someone something. I don't think that was the norm. I don't think Jesus was walking around calling people names all the times, but it wasn't like outside of the toolkit. What would Jesus do does include at times making a whip, overturning tables, and chasing people out of the church. What would Jesus do sometimes does include using language like you're the spawn of Satan.
That's true. Why did he do that? Because there's also so many examples where he could have used like crazy, possibly like mean or bullying terms. Like he could have referred to some woman as like a whore, right? Like she's sleeping with a lot of men and she's possibly doing it for money. Obviously she's this, but he chose not to. So that's a great question. I feel like, why did he choose in those moments to use such intense language?
Yeah, because clearly sometimes he says yes, he'll use language, and sometimes not.
Yeah.
Does he ever do it behind their back?
That's a good point.
That's a good point. I don't think so.
And I think a issue that people find with this is that, or why it's so inflammatory, is it addresses identity. Like, I'm always more, historically with my friends growing up, name calling. Why do we do name calling? And it's like almost telling me that I do something poorly is worse than telling me that I am dumb. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things that would hurt a little bit more, but then it really starts to hurt when we start being lumped in with somebody that we also view negatively. So that's where like labels in this type of way, I think, can be so inflammatory. It's like, I view this as very bad, but now if you're labeling me or categorizing me with that and saying that I'm a part of it, it's a little bit more hurtful, especially when there's no relationship, which is why I think it's so crucial. Yeah. Like Jesus did this with Pharisees, and without being there, it's easy to like disassociate them as if they're just strangers. But Jesus literally grew up in the same area as these people. The population of these cities obviously were not as big as they are now. And not only that, but he like frequented these synagogues. Like he knew them. A lot of them probably he knew by name. And so there's relationships, even being willing to say the harsh thing to somebody that we actually know versus being able to say the harsh thing to somebody we don't.
Yeah, and was Jesus labeling their identity or their actions in that moment? Like, and that's how I look at the
I don't know. You're child of your father, Satan.
Child of your father, Satan.
I mean, that's pretty...
Would he label them for all time that, though?
I think the answer I want to say is yes, and yet he does seem to be making a call about their actual identity in that moment. You are of your father, the devil. I mean, that's strong language. Like, I get it. Like, we want to see people through value. We want to be compassionate and loving. And yet, that's there.
Something that's super important, though, I think, is... because this is something that I didn't know how to interpret until recently. When he's calling them of their father the devil, it's because the devil up to that point had authority and dominion over the world. This is important because we've talked about things throughout this episode about like seeing people as the image of God, as imagers of God as we are. And this is the shift that took place. Yeah, Jesus did this super direct language to these people saying, you're children of the devil. But also that's because they were. It's again him highlighting the depravity of their state as it was. At the cross, he reclaimed dominion over the world so that Yahweh is now the Father and the King of the world. So now we are no longer children of the devil. So for us to then see people and label them according to that is not the gospel. But at that point, it was.
Wow.
Like,
so you think like if Jesus were here again and it was a similar situation, he wouldn't be using that language anymore?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I think he'd be saying, wake up. He'd be saying what Paul would say, like, wake up from your stupor. Like, recognize that you've been reconciled to your Father.
Yeah. No, so, I mean, and I think that even ties a good bow on it, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing people, we're seeing people as who they were always meant to be and separating them from their actions. And so, I think that ties it up, at least for me.
I like it. I think that moment's a mic drop moment. That was really good, Tyler.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good.
That was solid.